All right, today we are pulling back the curtain on the very first and, honestly, the most important step in any hacker's playbook, reconnaissance. Let's get into it.
So, if you had to guess, what's the very first thing a hacker does? And I'm not talking about that frantic, hoodie in a dark room typing you see in the movies. Nope. The real first step is something way more quiet, way more patient. It's all about pure intelligence gathering.
And that phase has a name, reconnaissance. Seriously, think of it like a spy planning a heist. They're not just going to run in blind, right? They're going to watch the building, learn the guard schedules, find the blueprints. They're collecting every single detail they can before making a move. For a hacker, this isn't just step one. It's the foundation the entire attack is built on.
Now, this intelligence gathering, it really breaks down into two main flavors. First up, we've got what's called passive reconnaissance. This is where the hacker is basically a digital detective, They're observing from way, way back, piecing together clues without ever knocking on the target's door.
And the name of the game here is stealth, total invisibility. The goal is to be a ghost. You want to build this incredibly detailed profile of your target using only information that's already floating around out there in public, so they have absolutely no idea you're even looking at them. So this really lays out the fundamental choice a hacker has to make. You can go the passive route. It's super safe, very low risk of getting caught, but you're stuck with only what you can find publicly. Or you can go with active recon, which we'll talk about in a sec, where you get way better info by poking the target directly, but you might just set off every alarm they have. It's that classic trade-off, Risk versus reward. So what's in this passive toolkit? Well, you've got stuff like a whois lookup, which is kind of like checking the public property records for a website to see who owns it. But then you have these really clever tricks like Google dorking. That's basically using special advanced search commands like a secret language for Google to find things that shouldn't be public, like sensitive files or login pages that a company accidentally left wide open. Okay, so what happens when all that public info just isn't enough? Well, that's when you move on to active reconnaissance. If the passive phase was like watching the house from across the street with binoculars, this is walking right up to the front door and jiggling the handle to see if it's unlocked. You're making contact.
The big payoff here is that it's way faster and much more accurate. You're literally asking the target systems questions and seeing how they answer. But, and this is a huge but, that direct contact is also the biggest risk. Any decent security system is designed to spot this kind of noisy activity, which means you could get your hand slapped before the real fun even starts.
So in the real world, this means using tools for things like port scanning. You can think of that as the digital version of walking around a building and checking every single door and window to see which ones are open. You're also trying to figure out exactly what software they're running, what operating systems they use, all to build a super precise map of their defenses and find those little cracks to exploit later.
Okay, so you've done all this work. You've gathered tons of passive data. Maybe you've done some active probing. Now what? You can't just work from a giant, messy pile of notes. This is where a process called footprinting comes into play. It's all about methodically organizing every single clue you found into one easy-to-read map of your target.
And this is a really important idea. Footprinting takes reconnaissance from just collecting stuff and turns it into a structured, professional process. It's about taking all that raw data and turning it into a goal-oriented blueprint of the target's entire digital world.
And here's pretty much how that map gets made. You start by locking down your exact target, the specific domain or IP range. Then you start systematically gathering all that domain info, discovering every single device on their network, mapping out their defenses like firewalls, and finally identifying the specific technologies they're using. And the final product? A super detailed report, basically your attack surface map.
And of course, you're not doing this all by hand. Hackers have an entire arsenal of specialized software to make this happen. For passive stuff, a tool like Maltego is amazing for seeing how all this public data connects. And for the active side, a tool called Nmap is, without a doubt, the king of network mapping and port scanning. Each tool is like a specialized instrument for one specific part of the job.
So let's bring this all home. Why on earth would anyone spend so much time and energy on this first step? Why is reconnaissance considered the most critical part of the whole operation, whether you're attacking or defending? It's because in the world of hacking, knowledge isn't just power, it's literally everything.
Just blindly throwing attacks at a wall is noisy, it's sloppy, and it almost never works. But an attack that's been carefully planned, one built on a solid foundation of great recon, that's precise, it's quiet, and it's way, way more likely to work. It's what separates the amateurs from the pros.
I mean, the strategic advantage you get is just massive. Good recon saves you a ton of time later on, it shows you the easy targets, that low-hanging fruit right from the start, and it lets you craft a perfect surgical attack plan. And maybe most importantly for the good guys, for the ethical hackers, this whole process perfectly mimics how real-world attackers operate, and that's the best way to test if a company's defenses are actually working.
So we've just walked through how an attacker systematically builds a profile, just by looking at all the digital breadcrumbs we leave online. So let me just leave you with this one thought. Now that you know how they look for information, what does your own digital footprint reveal about you?